Good evening, everyone. Welcome. I'm just going to wait a minute or so for folks to come into the virtual room, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Okay. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Government Transition Advisory Committee. Today is Wednesday, September 6th, and we will be here from 6 to 8 p.m. Committee members and community members listening in, welcome. This is the 9th regular meeting of the Government Transition Advisory Committee. My name is Julia Meyer. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Engagement and Community Participation Manager for the transition. Last month, the committee appointed 2 new co-chairs, Leah and Jose. Leah is going to facilitate tonight. Jose is on a plane, so he will not be joining us. Next slide, please. I'm going to take a moment to go over some meeting logistics. This is a hybrid meeting. The meeting is being recorded for later viewing. A copy of the recording will be posted on the transition webpage under past meetings and events. For today's meeting, we have closed captioning available, American Sign Language and Spanish language interpretation. To access Spanish interpretation, you can click on the globe icon at the bottom of your screen and select Spanish. To access closed captioning, click on the CC button on the bottom of your screen. Committee members, please take this time to change your chat settings to everyone so attendees can follow along. The meeting chat is part of the public record. For community members listening in, we have the Zoom Q&A feature available tonight. You can submit questions or comments through the Q&A function. We may not answer all of your questions today, but they will become part of the public meeting record. At today's meeting, we do have some time held for verbal public comment, but as a reminder, you can submit written public comments at any time.gov. I'm now going to turn it over to Leah to review tonight's agenda.
How exciting. First time.
Hey.
Hey. So, okay, we will begin with committee business, followed by a call for any reflections on the council's response to our letter. We have a short period held for public comment tonight. Then we have 2 primary agenda items that were of areas of interest of committee members. The first one being changes to the city's budget process so that a city administrator prepares an annual budget under the direction of the mayor, and facilities improvements for council chambers and council, mayor, and city administrator workspaces. Then before we adjourn our meeting today, we'll close with a brief review of next steps. And next slide, please. Okay, great. Real quick, before getting into committee business, since this is my first meeting as co-chair, I want to just take a minute to thank Lori and David for their service and acknowledge the massive amount of work that they put in. I think Jose and I have only been doing this for a little while, but it's immediately become clear just how much they've been doing behind the scenes that they have not, made us aware of. So just thank you. And thank you for all that you've done to get us up to speed on everything. One thing that they've graciously done is given us the reflections on how meetings have gone so far, along with some suggestions of maybe what we could try to do a little bit differently. We've taken those along with some feedback that we got from June's meetings with everyone individually, and are just going to try to do some different things. So all with the goal of getting participation amongst everyone in the group. So we'll probably run meetings a little bit different, try out different tactics. Some will work, some might not. And we encourage you to always email us with suggestions, but all of it is with the ultimate goal of making sure that everyone is engaged in our work here. Okay, now onto the official business. As mentioned earlier, Jose is going to be absent tonight. Amy Wood may be a little bit late or unable to attend entirely. And I also want to note for the record that Bill Farber has resigned from the committee. Jane DeMarco is now a voting member. And Brian Bellica is an alternate member. Welcome, Jane. And with that, Brian, do we have Brian on right now? Yeah. Okay, great. Brian, I'm going to turn it over to you quickly so you can introduce yourself to the group briefly.
Oh, sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Brian Balicka. I've been a Portland resident for about 7 years. I'm originally from the Midwest. Um, just a quick little intro about me. Used to work at GE, kind of lived all over the US as an engineer for GE Aviation. Ultimately came to Portland about 7 years ago. Now work at Nike, where I've been since I moved out here. Was a small business owner in Portland for a little while, and really just wanted to join this group a few months ago, probably for some of the same reasons that you all did, which is really looking forward to this new phase of government and what it can do for the city and really help us build back stronger. So hope to be in person at the next one. Couldn't make it today, but looking forward to meeting you all.
Welcome to the crew, Brian. Glad to have you here.
Thanks.
Now we need to move on to approving the August 10th, August 14th, and August 21st meeting summaries. Before we go into it, does anyone have any thoughts about the summaries? Great. Could I get a motion to approve the August 10th meeting summary?
Motion to approve the meeting summary.
Me. Could I get a second? Second by Fred. Any opposed? Excellent. Can I get a motion to approve the August 14th meeting summary? Fred, second. Thank you. Any opposed? Great. Can I get a motion to approve the August 21st meeting summary?
So moved.
Thank you, Fred.
Second.
Second by Julie. Anyone opposed?
I have just a couple notes about it. I think this is page 7, but I can't get back to my file right now. At the bottom, the last bullet, 5th line down, it says nationhood. I think it was just a transcription error instead of neighborhood. And then the next sentence is a little garbled. So
Oh, I think
that.
Nicole, do you want me to pass those around?
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks.
Thanks.
Times my spelling errors.
Yeah, no, I know.
You're human. Thank you. Any other comments? Excellent. Okay, thank you. Next slide, please. Great. Now I'd like to read through the working agreements to get us going. I do want to say before reading them that it is our hope that we are employing these agreements at each meeting, that they're being actively used, which is why we read them each time. So as I read through them, just take a moment to reflect on how they relate to our meetings and how they relate to your participation in the group. The working agreements state as follows. In discussions, challenge ideas rather than individuals. Offer constructive suggestions. 2, approach different opinions with curiosity. Seek to understand. 3, keep the needs and concerns of the local community and the larger region at the forefront of our work. 4, arrive on time and prepared to the best of your ability. Let the group know if you are unable to attend a meeting. The co-chairs will aim to incorporate tools for breathers. 5, keep multitasking to a minimum. 6, keep focus on the objectives of the meetings. Utilize co-chairs to note additional topics for discussions by submitting topics in writing via email. Next slide, please. 7, honor the decisions of the group. 8, contribute to the overall success of the group by finding ways to participate that best meet your needs. 9, step up, step back. Collectively work to ensure that every member who wants to be heard is heard. 10, embrace conflict and work with your fellow committee members and staff to find ways to give each other feedback. The co-chairs will aim to incorporate various feedback tools. And finally, use I statements. Next slide, please. Our final order of committee business is to preview a committee decision at our September 20th meeting about subcommittees. Over the past few weeks, committee members completed a survey to assess interest in forthcoming committees and have met one-on-one with June Reyes. Next slide, please. Based on the survey and one-on-ones, the two top identified topics, I should say, for subcommittees are voter education and council operations. Note that these are not decided on yet as the only ones we will move forward with. Those are the top two that people noted several times, though. Many folks identified other potential topics for future consideration, including change management, future facilities, city administrator, budgeting, communications, and community engagement. Next slide, please.
Question. Scope on council operations, how election will work? Is that the initial council's election of a chair and vice chair, or the November 2024 election of?
I think that's a great question, something that we'll probably get into at the next
Okay.
time when we clarify more, if that's okay.
Good.
But also, if you have more thoughts on it, feel free to email.
It kind of goes with voter education if it's the.
Next slide, please. The purpose of subcommittees are to foster dialogue and early engagement, gather key information, and advise transition staff. Subcommittee work will support informed recommendations by the committee to support an effective and efficient transition. Some identified considerations included subgroups may risk missing holistic perspectives, creating silos and require increased resources, and impacts to full committee, including reducing full committee meetings to monthly. The question we want to pose now is, as we target a November launch of subcommittees, do any proposed elements need clarification or modification to gain your endorsement? What I'm going to say at this moment is we only have until 6:15 for this meeting topic, leaving us 2 minutes for this conversation, which I think will be a meaty one. If it's okay with everyone, what I'd like to recommend is that people email their thoughts, and we'll make sure that there's ample time at our September 20th meeting to actually get into all of this and fully discuss subcommittees. I don't think it's worth trying to cram everyone's thoughts into 2 minutes.
Just to be clearly, including thoughts about what the subcommittees are.
Exactly. Yeah, because understandably, I think people have a lot of input, and 2 minutes is not going to cut it for us.
Are we still considering working groups as opposed to subcommittees? And is that going to be included in this conversation, or is that a different conversation?
I don't have an answer to that now. I think maybe if you could email about that, we can make sure that it's on the docket for the next agenda, unless Julia, you have thoughts that you want to share.
No, I mean, I think nothing has been closed. I think at this point, we wanted to reflect back what we heard from the survey that you all took, and then what came out of the one-on-one conversations that you had with June. So you could see sort of the combination of most folks thinking, have some time to ponder it, send any clarification or modification requests, and then we can talk about it as a full group. So I think short answer, yes, Amy. Work groups can be a part of it. As a reminder, work groups are time limited. Subcommittees are not, otherwise similar.
And final point to that, please do email co-chairs and Julia with any thoughts on this. We want to make sure that the September 20th conversation does cover all of people's concerns and interests.
And then if we put some comment in the chat tonight, is that sufficient?
Next slide, please. Okay. On August 23rd, council responded to our letter about the committee's role. The letter is posted online, and I'm assuming most or all of us have read it at this point. We have 10 minutes for committee member reflections on this at this point. As folks ponder if they want to share a reflection, I've asked Julia to remind folks about how the committee came into being, just to remind us why we're here.
The origin story.
The origin
tag.
story.
No, yeah, I think it is helpful for a couple of reasons. One, I think your conversations recently, the letter that you all drafted, the response, has led to some questions in community about like, where did this committee come from again, right? Sort of what is the authority? And I've also obviously heard many of you discuss collectively and in one-on-one conversations about sort of the utility of this kind of alternating conversation with city council. And so I say this to the folks at the table, the virtual table, and our community members listening in, just as a reminder. So, because we had multiple community bodies that started at kind of similar times, post November 2022 election, and they're different than each other. So the voter approved charter amendments from the fall require the independent district commission, require the salary commission, similar to sort of the independent authority that a charter commission has within our city's charter. Clear scope, clear timeline, hard work, but very, the box is clear that those folks work in. The advisory committee was not part of voter approved charter amendments, nor was it a recommendation from the Charter Commission about how transition management should be done. The mayor's office recommended advisory body. I think folks on staff probably support the concept. The mayor's office recommended the scope, recommended your appointments for council to consider appointing you collectively. So I just I think we know that, but I kind of just wanted to put it back out there about how we got here. And that it really was a sort of mayor's office initiated council agreement, and then the resolution appointing you with the roles that now I hope are clear and that we've talked about over the last couple of meetings. Thanks.
Thank you, Julia. And with that, if anyone has any comments that they would like to make, please raise your hand on Zoom. And I'm going to take the amount of time that we have and divide it equally amongst folks so that we can hear from everyone that wants to say something. I'll give that a few more seconds. Okay. I know it's a constrained amount of time, but everyone's going to have about 1.5 minutes to share. Again, we want to make sure that everyone has a chance to, which is why we're limiting it. And so we'll do our best to politely let you know when time is up. Fred.
Okay, well, I was offended by the response, so I thought it was rather patronizing, and that we said, well, we don't want you, we never meant for you to have any oversight authority. We never asked for oversight authority, but simply advisory capacity, using our knowledge and the input we get from transition staff and other city staff in order to help them accomplish their goals and needs in this very tight time frame. I questioned and asked some questions later about the budget process. There's 118 advisory committees in the city, way too many. Most bureaus have their own citizen budget advisory committee. Well, once we maybe lock into potentially 5 service areas, but just maybe we don't need 25 different bureau or 26 bureau advisory committees for that budget, but 1 maybe or 5 within the service areas, some along those lines. And I noticed under change management, which is one of the issues we were asking about, we're told that's none of your business. Well, it's back on the agenda, which I think is wonderful, because we want to hear what's going on, even though we don't have a role in deciding what happens, but we are the voice for the community. I just in the change management transition plan, they say that they want to, besides the bureau directors and the EAs for the council members, that they were going to identify external stakeholders with diverse representation. If we're not that.
Thank you, Fred. These are all great points, and I hate to cut you off. I think chat's a great opportunity here to add the rest of your thoughts. Thank you so much.
I'm done.
Thank you. Zach?
Hey, everybody. I will be brief. I guess my initial response is that I'm not entirely surprised by what we heard from council, but I do think that it should be our focus as a committee to ensure that this space being publicly recorded, meetings is an opportunity for the public at large to learn about the transition and to allow ourselves through the medium that we're a part of at this point, but also through other ways of representing the interests of the public to be heard at city council meetings when they make those decisions. And so I would hope that when we feel confident in our ideas about what this transition should look like, we should be able to voice ourselves through representatives like our co-chairs at city council meetings and communications timeframes or whatnot. That's all.
Thank you, Zach. I have Joe up next.
Yeah, just two quick and kind of detailed comments. One is that, while I think it was unwise, they made it crystal clear that they don't want us to be involved in the reorg. And I'm really disappointed that this led to Bill Farber's resignation. I think that he was a really good contributor to our process, and I think we'll miss him as soon as tonight, actually. But I totally understand his decision in light of the fact that his areas of greatest expertise and interest were taken off of the table. I'm pleased that one of the areas they highlighted was, and I'm going to put air quotes on this, the GTAC should advise on and assist in educating the community about the process and outcomes of the district process, because I think this has two important implications about things that we've discussed already. One of them is, again, quoting, expectations around district office outreach to the community and constituent relations group work absolutely critical. And I'm, expecting that to be on the work plan of our council operations subcommittee. And the other is that, we've already intersected with the efforts of the Office of Community and Civic Life to respond to the new districts. I think that message from TJ McHugh clearly indicated that it's imperative that we share timely and accurate information and make sure our work is aligned with theirs. And
Thank you,
so I
Joe.
think it's really important that we either get Civic Life on one of our meeting agendas as soon as possible or schedule a meeting with them and a small group of our members.
Thank you. I want to point out some additional folks have raised their hands since I initially budgeted time. Please try to be as concise as possible with your comments, not because we don't want to hear from you, but because we want to hear from everyone. So Lori, if you could please take less than a minute.
Thank you. I was not surprised by the letter and happy to see the clarification. I think we've now gotten two really clear lists of expectations, the one from Mike Jordan in May, and now again from the mayor and the city council. And I'd like to see us document a work plan to make it not unclear at all what our responsibilities are and ensure our agenda aligns to those list of tasks. The second thing I thought is they invited us, and I think it's a great opportunity to put together a communication plan to better connect with the committee and the city council. So I'd like to see us figure out whether it's monthly, quarterly, some cadence that we're regularly communicating with city council.
Thank you, Lori. Amy, if you could again briefly share.
Yeah, I really appreciate what you said, Lori, about communicating and using the opportunity. I'd like to highlight again our colleague Bill Farber's resignation and read a line from his very well-worded letter. He's a big loss for the committee, and this is Bill's comment on the letter. The letter was a carefully constructed, narrowly legalistic effort by the council to diffuse a potentially embarrassing controversy with a citizen group while severely limiting the scope of our advisory work. I fear that the council is using GTAC and the time of many capable city staff to provide a convenient way to define citizen engagement in a way that keeps an arm's length relationship between the citizens and elected officials in this very important transition in the city government. I encourage everybody watching to read Bill's letter of resignation and also to read the letter from the council. The tenor, I think, speaks directly to their esteem for the citizen engagement in the process. And I think, yeah.
Thank you, Amy. Carrie?
Thanks for reading that stuff from Bill's letter. I think that's really important. I was furious and baffled by the response. But I just point out the good news is now that some of that work is out of our scope, we as individuals can put it in our scope ourselves. And I certainly plan on following the city reorganization, the city administrator, the deputy administrators, how they work with the deputy mayors, because I think that's going to be how the government works in the new government in 2025. That's where the most important changes are going to happen. So I would urge us, if not here, elsewhere, to pay careful attention to those things that were in Bill's letter and that are going to impact neighbors and neighborhoods everywhere. So that I
Thank you,
guess
Terry.
that's it. I'm disappointed.
Thank you, Terry. Jane?
Thank you very much. I wasn't surprised by the letter at all, but I actually appreciate the clarity. And I think that although I was a little bit disappointed, I think that with the clarity we get to work harder on all the other stuff. I also know from having gone through a big reorg at the port myself that this is only the first step, and the real reorg will happen when the mayor is hired and when the city administrator is hired, because that's all going to change again. So I'm just personally going to push forward on the things that are on the list, and I would appreciate a great work plan from us all about what are we going to do and how are we going to do it, because I think that's how we build confidence in the community we serve, and that's how I think we build confidence with the mayor and city council, and who knows, they might have a change of heart after they've seen our tremendous work. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jane. David, we are a little bit behind, so thank you for allowing us to go over here, David.
I'll just be really quick. I just wanted to say that this letter, even though it could be frustrating for some people, I think that it gave us a good avenue to move forward with city council and the mayor's office, and that we, even though it was frustrating and it continues to be frustrating, that gave us some definition that we much needed, and that we should just take this opportunity to continue to work through the avenues that were provided for us, and continue what we were supposed to be doing, which is to get our oh gosh, it's been a long day, I apologize, but just do what we were mandated to do, which is to provide oversight over the things we're allowed to.
Thank you, David. Connie, I noticed your hand was raised. You put a comment in chat. Do you have anything that you wanted to say as well?
Okay.
Yeah.
Since we're talking about the work plan, just wondering if there's one that already exists. As much as I appreciate the parameters that they've written, I'm curious about our tactics.
Noted, and for future conversation. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for sharing your thoughts. Thank you to community members for allowing us to go over time. And I want to turn it over to Julia now to introduce public comment.
Yes, can we reshare? Thank you. So now is the time for verbal public comment. Folks will notice we only had 5 minutes held on tonight's agenda. We always ask folks to sign up ahead of time. We had one community member sign up ahead of time. So we will take her first, and then I think we have time to see if one more person in the audience wants to give verbal public comment. As a reminder, folks can always submit comment at any time through our online public comment form or by emailing us at transition@portlandoregon.gov. Testifiers tonight have 3 minutes to share their thoughts. And the person who signed up is Nancy Champlin. And Nancy, I am guessing you are named Southeast Uplift. So I'm going to promote you to a panelist. And you should be able to come into the room. Do we see Nancy?
Okay.
Oh, hi. Um,
Hi, everyone.
Thank you so much for being here. Whenever you're ready to get started, we'll give you 3 minutes.
Great. Well, thank you for having me. My name is Nancy Champlin. I use she and her pronouns, and I'm the executive director of Southeast Uplift Neighborhood Coalition. We are one of the 7 district coalitions that are supported through grants from the Office of Community and Civic Life. And we are within that group, we are one of the 4 nonprofit district coalitions. So we serve 20 neighborhoods in inner Southeast Portland, as well as the neighborhoods that straddle Northeast and Southeast. Our mission is to collaborate with the Southeast Portland community to build informed, inclusive, and participatory neighborhoods that support our social and ecological well-being. And our mission ties in with our vision, which is for the district as it is now and as it will be in the future, is a more resilient future for everyone that lives there, so that everyone feels and is welcome, interconnected, and empowered with the resources they need to advocate for change on the issues that impact their lives. So it is in that spirit that I come here today to say, we are a huge part of the historic infrastructure and civic engagement in Portland. And we would love to be helpful in any way in making sure that we're participating, amplifying, assisting in any way with the community outreach that needs to happen to make sure that Portlanders within our district are understanding this transition. And I know that the other district coalitions feel the same way. So anything that you would like me to take back to them to engage them, I'm happy to just get all of our district coalitions mobilized throughout all of our neighborhoods in Portland. And that's it.
Amazing timing. Thank you so much, Nancy. So yeah, we'll just pause for a moment, and if you are virtual probably and would like to give a verbal public comment, please just raise your Zoom hand and we can promote you into the room. Mark, you got it. Hi, Mark. Thanks for joining us. You know the deal.
Yep.
You have 3 minutes.
So I'll try
Go
to keep
ahead.
this quick. In thinking about all the comments that you just made as a group about the council's letter back to you, or to the mayor's letter back to you, I couldn't help but think that there's a certain irony to it, in a way, for the council and for the mayor in particular, because if you had been given the broad range of things to do that you had thought was part of your mandate, you would have been the main conduit for continue to be the main conduit for all sorts of focus on questions and needs for clarity and just curiosity about what's happening during this period of change. But by reducing your scope, it means that it'll be up to others to do so from a variety of perspectives in a variety of ways. And this will take even more time from council and the mayor and their staff to try to figure out. So I really feel like it's a disadvantage for you ultimately, but it's also a disadvantage to the council and the mayor. Honestly, I think they would have been better served by giving you that wider scope. And I just wanted to say that. I really thank you all for the work that you're doing and will be doing. And that was it.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate both of you for sharing. And just as a reminder, you can give public comment at any time online. Yes. Go ahead, you can.
Okay. Right. Nicole, when you're able, next slide, please. Thank you. In the letter we did receive from council, one of the roles of GTAC was stated to advise on and educate the community about the expansion of council and creation of the 4 districts. A big part of that role is gathering and sharing community feedback to help inform the budget choices for funding council offices, which is great because tonight we get to hear about both budget and facilities. And this will give us information to help us better understand the process so that we can provide education, gather feedback from the community, and offer advice to the transition team. So first up, committee members have asked to learn about and provide feedback on the changes to the budget process so that a city administrator prepares an annual budget under the direction of a mayor. And with that, I would like to turn it over to Tim Grew, the director of the city budget office. I'm going to let Tim introduce any of his coworkers that are joining. One note there, we're going to wait until after the presentation to take any comments or questions rather than during. So wait until after to raise your hands. And welcome, Tim and crew.
Sure. Thanks, Ginger.
Good evening. It's nice to meet the members of the committee tonight. I've heard much about you, but I haven't really been with you. Well, some of you maybe I've been with previously. Again, I'm Tim Grew. I'm the city's budget officer. I'm just going to do a very brief introduction. Ruth is a senior member of the budget office staff. She's responsible for our performance area, which is something new for us that we're moving ahead of, trying to get more accountability in the budget process and also compliance with key priorities of the community and the council. She also, though, is very active in the budget process, so she's very knowledgeable. She'll be doing the majority of the presentation. The time, just to start, I just wanted to say that the timing of this meeting for us is maybe a little bit premature. And the reason I say that is let's stop there for a minute. This is new territory for us too, in the budget process. Although I've been through many, many reorganizations, never been through an entire organization, entire city moving into a different type of organization. The reason I say it's a little bit premature is we are working very hard to redo this budget process. And we're probably within a month of getting council and the mayor and everybody else that's involved agreeing on what that process is going to look like. I suspect it will be a combination of things that we do well now. It will include legal requirements under state budget law. Those aren't going to go away. They won't go away when we have a new chief administrative officer. But I do want to say that I see it as an opportunity to experiment some things as well. We know what the new government is going to look like. And we're trying to find ways where we might try to test some things that we feel might occur in that administration going forward in this budget process. We don't have specifics on that yet, but we would hope to do that. We also have some budget notes that the council gave us to improve the budget process. And it's things like, one thing we don't do a good job of is have our financial plans and our forecasts and our economic assumptions presented to the council early in the budget process. It comes up almost in conjunction with the approval of the budget, and we need to do better than that. So there's a lot of, I think you'll see a lot of improvements in this budget process going forward with an aspect of trying to anticipate things that the new group would do. Having said that, I call this a hybrid budget because, as you know, half that budget, when it's operational, is going to be with this council, with this mayor, with these bureau managers. The next half is going to be with the new council and with the new mayor, and at some point, a chief administrative officer. And that to me means we're going to have a more centralized budget process going forward. And by that, I mean more involvement of the mayor and the chief administrator and the bureau managers formulating a proposed budget that then will go to the council. So that's something really new, and I think that's something good based on my own experience. And I guess the other thing I would say that you should keep in mind is as soon as we get into that second half, we're going to have to start working with the new 12-member council and the new mayor and the new chief administrative officer on what the budget's going to be for the next year. So it's going to be a real interesting situation, be challenging for us in the budget office, but I'm looking forward to it. I think there's a lot to be done. I'm going to stop there because I don't want to take up all your time. I know we have having listened to you, you're very time oriented, so I want to make sure we can do that. I'm going to turn this over to Ruth, and just one last comment. We designed this with information for people that may not be very familiar with our budget process. I know many of you are very familiar with our budget process. So as Ruth goes through here, if we're doing things that you already know about, just let us know and we'll keep going. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Tim. And yeah, I'm Ruth Levine. Yeah. Oh, okay. Yes.
Get you on camera. You got her?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm good. My title is the Citywide Performance Manager in the City Budget Office. Next slide, or should I continue? So just real quick, I'm going to do a quick rundown of the current budget process, but I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it because it could take up, your whole evening here. And then we'll talk quickly, like high level, what do we know are the impacts from charter reform? And then what does that mean about what could change? And then we'll talk about what's happening in terms of changing the budget process. And then we'll talk a little bit about community engagement in the budget process. Slide, please. So this is a quick, the high level overview of the city's annual budget process. I should note that in addition to our annual budget process, every year we have what are called supplemental budgets or budget monitoring processes, which is kind of the process by which we move money from one fiscal year to the next. But I'm going to focus mostly on the annual budget process. So I'm not going to go through every piece of this, but it generally flows from kind of the planning stages and the inputs to the process, which include the economic outlook, because that tells us how much resources we have available. And then through the budget development process with mayor's budget guidance. And then currently we've received 28 PDF bureaus requested budgets. And then at that point, we go through analysis, prioritization, and then the mayor's proposed budget comes out in currently the end of April, and then council can amend and approve that budget in May, and then they adopt the budget in June. So that bottom row there are the legally required steps. And I'll go through in the next couple of slides some specifics about those really quickly. So again, I'm not going to go through all of this, but this is the early sort of budget preparation phases. There's a lot of internal work on the bureaus in terms of what they are expecting to need in terms of resources. And keep in mind, this is not just adding things, right? It's realigning existing stuff. It's aligning your budget to what you're actually doing. It's potentially planning for constraints. So it's all of that activity. That's what bureaus are planning for. At the same time, the mayor's office is planning and then working on their budget guidance. Our office is working with them and with bureaus, and then also working on economic forecasts. We then have some council work sessions in the fall. There's typically what we call like a council budget retreat. And then we have Cal targets, which are what we call base budgets or current appropriation levels. So that's like, what did you do last year plus inflation? And then bureaus submit their budgets. And then in terms of the approved and adopted, this is where you see more of the legally required steps. And the only thing that will change in terms of the legally required steps is in the charter, there's the mayor's proposed budget has to be released by May 5th of every year. The rest of the legally required steps stay as they are. So that was real quick, and I'm happy to answer questions. We're happy to talk more about any questions you have on the process. I was trying not to overload you, but so what is known? I think, there's the legally required dates, as we were just saying, are set, but a lot of the work to get there is flexible. In addition to that sort of schedule that we know, there are certain things about the roles that we know, right? So the city administrator will be the budget officer under state law. The mayor will propose the budget, as I said. So we know that those two people will kind of be in the driver's seat in terms of proposing the budget. Council will act as the budget committee for the approved budget. That means they'll be able to make amendments. Now, of course, that's a change from their current practice where they are also working with their portfolio bureaus to help present a requested budget. So that will be different under the new structure. And then, as Tim mentioned, the new form of government kind of, I think, will lead to more centralization in terms of how the budgets are developed and managed, frankly. And then this is more about, like, as we're thinking about the budget process, where are the pieces that we know that can change in the new form of government? And I kind of tried to bucket it a little bit. So there's sort of identifying budget priorities, developing budget proposals, and then balancing or prioritizing amongst budget proposals. All of those things can look different from the way they look now. And likely will, because again, we won't have commissioners in charge leading the way in terms of how those budgets get developed. And then I have a bucket for how we do supplemental budgeting, which is a little more technical and probably not what we want to spend our time on tonight. But that there are ways to change that within boundaries set by state budget law. So this is the timeline. Tim spoke to this, but this visual might help you. It's a little confusing. The thing to note is that, so we are at the beginning of that left-hand orange box right now, roughly speaking. In a year from now, we will be about to have an election and about to start the second orange box. And then in January of 2025, where the blue turns to green, we will be in the middle of that fiscal year. So, and then if you leave those fall bump and spring bump are those supplemental budget processes,
Okay.
right? If you keep those where they are right now, that's where they fall. So the first action, one of the very first things that the new council would do is the spring 24-25 spring bump, which, yeah. So I think, in terms of thinking about kind of why are we here and what is driving the need for change, one of the things driving the need for change is that. So I think that's just, as it's hard to wrap your head around this, but okay, next slide. Okay, so what are we doing so far? We recognize there's, we've just kind of started thinking about this and there's a lot here, but Tim mentioned a couple budget notes in the adopted budget, which are, in the current structure, the way council kind of says, like, we didn't do this thing this year, but we want to do it differently next year. So we have a budget note about more centralized forecasting, which means not having every bureau we have the general fund, and then we have like utilities have their own forecasting, the development services has its own forecasting, having a little bit more shared and collaborative information sharing on that. And then the earlier financial plan, 5-year financial plans. And then we've been convening some citywide stakeholder groups. So we have a group of citywide finance managers that our office convenes to talk about these changes, bureau directors, obviously, and then working with CAO Jordan and the mayor's office on these changes. And then you all, community input. And we also have the Portland Insights Survey, which I can talk more about, but we run that. And we have focus groups coming up that are a part of that. Okay, almost done here. So here are some of the early themes. I will say there's things we know that are not on this list yet. In terms of where we want to go with changes to the budget process. Some of them speak to sort of the budget notes we were talking about with more coordinated financial planning. And then, but some of it is, you know, really connecting budget priorities to a strategic plan for the city and then connecting that to desired outcomes as opposed to just saying like a generic concept of like, we want cleaner streets or whatever it is, actually having like goals potentially and or outcomes associated with those. More collaborative budget development. So again, we're not going to have 28 PDFs in the future, but what does that look like in terms of how are we coming up with ideas and how are we kind of narrowing them down? And then reducing the work of the supplemental budgets. The things that are not on this list, but we know we need to talk about include sort of the role of the new council. And then more about community engagement in the budget process, which I think on the next slide. So, and you all talked about this a little bit. We have a lot of different avenues for community engagement in the city in general, and the budget process is no exception. These are the current structures for community engagement in the budget process. We are legally required, obviously, to have public testimony and then to have a citywide budget advisory committee. The other pieces are not legally required and can change. But the insight survey, I already noted that, but that's kind of part of the idea of the insight survey is to be able to inform budget priority setting. So I will stop there and we're happy to.
If I could just really quick, I want to put a lot of emphasis on the strategic plan. In our meetings with the people that do budgeting in the city and our finance people in the city, that's been a constant theme that has come forward. And because it allows the bureaus to know what the priorities are, where the direction is going into the future and how they fit in, and it just makes for better budgeting as well. However, I do want to point out it's not a process that can be done quickly. And we believe that the best time to do that is as we move into the new government, to help them develop their vision for how they're going to move forward, particularly with having districts as well, because that brings a whole new element into it. But we a lot of support for that happening in the budget process, not just the budget process, but as we manage the new government.
For sure.
Thank you for the presentation. I'm going to open it up for questions and comments from committee members now. I'm going to put into the chat. Julia had sent out some questions that had been asked by folks already about the budgeting process. So refer to that. There might be some information in there that's helpful. But then with that, I'm going to hand it off to Zach first.
Hey, thanks. I apologize if this was answered in the little cheat sheet, but my question is, will each city council office be submitting a budget request, or will they be submitting a budget request as a whole?
For their own budgets, for their offices, or?
Correct.
Are we talking the current form of government or the future?
Well, our current form of government, each office, each commissioner submits a budget request, and I'm curious if you're going to be receiving individual budget requests from each council office, which would afford a little bit more flexibility maybe of how those dollars would be spent.
What generally happens is the bureaus work with their commissioner in charge in budget formulation. But that budget is reviewed by the commissioner and then approved, and then that's what goes to the city council.
Right, but the commissioner's office itself also submits a budget request.
Yes, their own budget request. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
Yes.
So
And
will each council office submit their own budget request, or will council as a
I don't think
whole
we-
submit a?
I don't think we
know that yet.
Okay.
I think, but I will say that we are working on that because we have new service areas.
Right.
And if we're going to be more centralized, we want to see if there's ways that we can start proceeding in that direction in this coming budget process, but we've made no decisions.
Amen.
Thank you, Zach. Destiny?
Two questions, and I don't know the budget process, so this was great. One of the things that I had a question is currently it looks like the mayor proposes the budget publicly. I think it was like
the end of April.
End of April, and then the council votes on it mid-May. So at what point, like how much time does the public actually have time to review it? Because you're legally required to ask for public testimony. That's the first question.
A couple different ways of explaining that. As you heard earlier in your conversation, most of the bureaus have budget advisory groups. So they've been active in the formation of the budget as it's being presented to the council. And they also generally do testimony before the city council. We also have a select group of people who actually come before the council, having reviewed the entire budget, to make comment during the process as well. And then I'd like to emphasize this because we kind of forget this, that we are open to any citizen that wants to come and talk to the budget. We have listening sessions where the council sits 3 times after the proposed budget is approved. And for the most part now virtually, have questions and issues raised by the public, and they actually have an exchange of discussion at that. And we note it. And if it's something that the mayor and the council think needs to be addressed, then we'll work on that. Does that help?
But in terms of the actual time between when the proposed budget is released and when the legally required approved budget comes out, it's not a lot of time. So I think the idea is, to incorporate feedback, throughout the process, in the priority setting process, and then in the time during which kind of decisions are being made. But both in our current process and in the new process, council will have a fairly short window to actually propose amendments to the proposed budget.
And it'll be the mayor working with the chief administrator to present that proposed budget to the council.
Part of the planning to make it more accessible to the general public outside of these committees, because usually committees, there's an inequity of access for a lot of people.
Sorry,
The general
is part of it. Sorry.
Yeah, for the next phase, like knowing the budgeting system isn't always working, is a part of the plan to get the greater public more involved in accessing public testimony.
That would be a good objective. I think it's a work in progress. And part of that is, again, new things for us, having districts. And how do we have activation of those things? The council, being a 12-member council, how will we have them involved in the development of the proposed budget in a consulting kind of way? But also maybe out of districts or whatever, having them given an opportunity to be involved in that budget process. So I think overall, you'll see more involvement in the problem.
And that's my actual second question is what does it mean when the council is the budget committee of the approved budget meeting? Does that mean that they don't get to be involved until it's approved? Or does that mean that they're working with, because they are public body facing the mayor and the chief administrative officer? Is that a goal of communication setting?
2 things on that. Because we have the current system, hopefully we can get a little progress in that direction in this forthcoming budget. But as I said previously, we're going to walk right into a new council, a new chief executive officer, and a new mayor. And one of the things we need to discuss with them is how that council is going to be involved in the budget process. They'll really have to make that decision. We can give them lots of options. We can give them how other cities do that. In fact, Ruth did a whole thing on budgeting. I think maybe you've got a document on how other cities address their budget process.
Thank you, Destiny. We have adjusted the schedule slightly to allow for more time for questions here. If that's okay, I am going to go a little bit out of order with hands raised to make sure that we're prioritizing folks who haven't had a chance to speak yet. So Mani?
I was wondering if you could tell me.
You can mute your computer. Could you tell me what the city advisory budget committee, I'm not saying the right thing, I think. So yeah, the citywide budget advisory committee looks like right now and how you see it interacting with us?
Or do you see that interaction happening with us? Who oversees it? What's the body? Who are the people?
I'd have to get back to you on who the people are.
Yeah, that's why I was struggling with too. We had a group of 6 people at one time that actually sat in the mayor's office as he was doing his proposed budget. And also participated in the listening sessions that we had with the public. And they were a very diverse group. One was several of them were business people. One was an executive of a nonprofit company, a nonprofit organization. And another was just a city, what I'd call a citizen advocate. So that's primarily what we have done during that. But we also have these boards in the city, like the Parks Board, that's very active from the community. They're community representatives primarily that are active throughout the budget process as well. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, I think it helps me understand what's already out there, but I'm trying to connect the pieces of what the mayor's office has clarified as our scope and how that will connect with the existing bodies that are there. If you have thought that through. Since we're wanting community engagement and community input, are you gonna continue to use the same channels, or how do you feel like this body could add value and not replicate work that's already happening?
I would hope that we have that kind of discussion as we go through this budget process, but to be completely forward with you, I think that's another issue that's going to play out in the budget process going forward with the new government.
Thank you. Juliet?
Hi, my name is Juliet Hyams. I use she, her pronouns. I'm curious, when you do forecasting, do you build in a percentage of anticipated staff turnover? And do you think that will be different under the new charter? And what do you think might happen in the middle, in the transition?
I can speak to the forecasting of our general fund, which is where we have all of our discretionary dollars that could be allocated on just about anything. We do a very rigorous assessment of the economy. We do very in-depth expenditure forecasting, which would take into consideration vacancy savings and that kind of stuff to the degree we have that information. And we very closely look at our revenues. And once that forecast is made, then we know how much each year we give our bureaus a target for their budget. And once we issue that in the forecast, then we know if we're going to have a surplus or if we have a cutback type of situation. So I guess what I'm trying to tell you is our forecasting, at least in the general fund, is very vigorous. In the utilities, they also have very sophisticated forecasting systems that take in all the assumptions, expenditures, and also in their case, forward capital projects going out a considerable amount of time. I don't have too much concern over right now how we forecast our budgets. I would like it to be more centralized. So when council is getting information, it's not just for the general fund, it's for all of the utilities, all of the bureaus, the PBOT, the treasury the transportation operation. And that's why I was talking about having that done earlier in the process, but more holistically too.
I would just add, if you're interested in like issues like vacancy savings, that's the upcoming fall budget monitoring process, which will be heard in council on October 4th, is where we actually see for the last fiscal year for 22-23, what quote unquote fell to balance, meaning what was kind of left over, right? And part of that is driven by vacancy savings, by positions that were, budgeted for, but vacant for a portion of the year. So you can get a sense for what happened last year in that fall vote.
Thank you. Okay, we do have a hard stop at 7:10 for this. So Terry and Fred will be able to take your questions as long as they're brief. We'll close it after that. So Terry.
Yeah, I'll try to be brief. conceptually here, it's clear that the new process is more centralized, which is good. But as part of our council operations scope of work, without the council members being commissioners in charge, they're going to be a little bit more remote from these budgets, and not as skilled and informed and not as focused in particular areas. I'm curious whether you have or would consider council budget subcommittees to do deeper dives into sub areas of the budget earlier on. I guess the March work sessions that you have would be the spot to do that, perhaps. But I'm concerned that you're going to have a newbie council with no experience coming in, looking at a massive centralized budget. And that council has the final say. You know, there's no mayoral veto. The council, what the council decides is what the council decides. And I'm worried that they're going to be further from the numbers than they've ever been before. Anyway, so those are thoughts and worries and concerns, and wondering if you have any thoughts on that.
Couple of responses, and maybe one of my colleagues would like to, I think. We've been discussing having budget 101 sessions with the council, the new council, as soon as possible after they're elected, so they don't come in not knowing how the budget process works. What you described, I believe, is very common in other jurisdictions that have been operating with a city manager and mayor and a council that serves as the budget committee. And generally, they have at least a group of that council serving as a committee going through the budget process. So I think those are the types of things we'll be looking at. And it just seems like that needs to happen. Otherwise, you take a proposed budget to the council, they don't have a whole lot of time or information on how that budget was developed.
Thank you. We just have 2 minutes left. So Fred.
Sure, thank you. I'll try to be quick. Thank you so much, both of you. It's refreshing to see you in this position, like new Tim. I feel much more confident in the city's success as you progress through this hybridization. My concern is primarily with the existing budget process with the, as I stated earlier, the numerous citizen budget advisory committees for the separate bureaus. I understand the Citizen Utility Board, that's a strategic role. Prosper Portland has some statutory constraints, et cetera. But to centralize better all of the services, especially those administrative support services, and I'm waiting to hear a response to my question to the transition team about which bureaus have separate IT, separate HR, separate accounting, separate et cetera. But I would hope that the current council, as they approach this hybrid leap year, if I can call it that, that because they've been assigned service areas, and those service areas, bureaus that are grouped under those are talking to each other through the CAO and hopefully the budget office to some extent, how they can coordinate, how they can collaborate, how they can consolidate, that ultimately we would end up with maybe 5 citizen budget advisory committees for each of those service areas, should they fall into those pockets somehow, and that they be involved in advance, much as the current bureaus now involve those citizens. I don't know who I'm assuming each bureau appoints their own. I'm worried that because it's been almost a century now of silosization, it's that term, of individual bureaus, that there's a calcification of ethos and self-definition of needs. The individual bureaus, thank God they're talking to each other now, and with some stress. I know that we're not allowed to listen in, but my hope is that that we have a leaner, meaner, and cleaner form of administration going forward. And the budget process is so critical to that. I wish that each of these new current council members were able to, in this, because it's a hybrid, that as you approach next May, that they give up their sense of proprietary ownership of individual bureaus, even those that the mayor has assigned them service areas. I would even recommend to the mayor that he take over all bureaus as you approach the budget adoption period, just so that if they're all running for mayor, they're trying to compete with each other for public advantage, that's not going to help.
Thank you for your comments and questions there, Fred. I think, unfortunately, we don't have time to answer in the meeting, but Tim and Ruth, thank you. If we could follow up offline with them. Julia has always also put some information in the chat. Thank you so much for being here tonight. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
If we could go back to the slides, I'm going to move us forward. Yeah, please come on through. Yeah. Committee members have asked to learn about and provide feedback on the facilities improvements for chambers and workspaces. The committee has previously asked a number of questions about facilities, and those questions and the city responses are available on the webpage for tonight's meeting. Julia, would you mind posting them in chat again? Please refer to those questions and answers just so that we're on the same page about the information that we already have. Similar as the last presentation, we'll wait till the entire presentation is over before asking questions. And at this time, I would like to hand things over to Matt Souter, manager of the Division of Asset Management. And I'll let Maddie, I got Matt and Maddie on here. So apologies for that. I'll let Maddie introduce any coworkers that are joining.
Sure, thanks. Hello, my name is Maddie Sauter, and I run something called the Division of Asset Management. Mostly that just means that I get to say that I'm the dam manager in every setting, and I get to make that joke for the last 4.5 years. But I'm joined today with two colleagues, Randy Selleck. You can introduce yourself.
Everyone, I'm Randy Selleck. I am supervisor of our MAC team, also serving construction project manager role, the lead project manager on charter reform for facilities. I just want to take a brief second. Thank you so much for having us. We're really excited about this project.
Caitlin? Sure, Caitlin Geehee. I'm supporting Andy on the efforts, and I'm looking forward to presenting. So I thought we might, we can go to the next slide if you want. We're not a group that's often invited to the dance. So we're deep in the bowels of operations. We are the ones filling out spring bump, fall bump paperwork. We're thinking about vacancies. We're trying to figure out how to scrape together every last dime available for the work that we do. So we're not often included in these discussions. So I agree. Thank you so much for having us. I thought what might be beneficial is to do just a quick overview of how facilities work at the city, and then we can go into what at least our perception is of the scope for this project and why, and then explain the process we're in and kind of some of the designs and other things that we have. So then open it up for questions. So the first is the dam department, OMF dam. We are an organization under OMF. If you know OMF, it's the Office of Management and Finance. So I report up through, Mike Jordan is my boss, and then we report up through the mayor. If you are familiar with the city, we used to be a bureau called BIBS. That was sort of dissolved in 2018, and it was reformed into something called DAM. So DAM sits alongside HR, BTS, Bureau of Finance and Revenue, to help comprise kind of one of the four main pillars of OMF in terms of staffing and expenditures. That said, despite our large scale, so I oversee both fleet and facilities, we're not the only facility owning bureau at the city. So most infrastructure bases at the city are owned by one entity. So for example, City Fleet owns all of the city's fleet. BTS owns all of the city's data security infrastructure. PBOT, I think, owns all of the bridges, for example. But facilities are actually a rarity. They're owned by 6 different bureaus at the city, which can really kind of complicate management. So it's us, PBOT, Water, BES, Fire, and Parks. We are the facility owners of the city. OMF, we have 18 different facilities that we oversee. It's about a third of the city's footprint and about a third of its financial value. So we own about $1 billion worth of stuff citywide. I think our asset base is valued at around $3 billion for all the facilities in the city. Our scope is pretty much all of the downtown office space for us. That includes City Hall. We also oversee most of the public safety spaces, so all of police's facilities, but not fire. They're kind of a special exemption. And then we also see some of the public works facilities. So for example, if you've heard about the Kirby Garage, you can Google it. Most highest risk facility in the city, that is our facility. That's where my city fleet organization works. So we provide comprehensive services. So it's everything from trying to plan for this asset base, although we have very limited planning staff, to really looking at trade-offs. So do we do X or Y? How do we shape it up? What's the best nature of investment? All the way through capital projects, which is where Randy and Caitlin work, all the way through maintenance. So that's everything through to janitorial. So it's full-scale services for about 18 facilities, but then we also provide the services contract to all the other bureaus of the city that own facility assets, for the most part, except for parks and fire. We also do all of the real estate services for the city. So some bureaus like BES are authorized lease signers. So if they need to sell a parcel, buy a parcel, they can execute that transaction. But a lot of the bureaus aren't big enough to do that. And so in that case, we do a property search for them. We serve as a broker, we liquidate the asset, we buy the asset, whatever it might be. So we both have building scope as well as functional scope, which is real estate. And I will tell you, again, as a group not often invited to the dance, we are really excited about charter reform. Really excited. So Tate White, who's hiding over in the corner, did an assessment of the infrastructure bureaus recently, I think in January. Facilities has the most decapitalized asset base of the city. So this means out of the $1 billion of stuff that we own, we need about $750 million to replenish it. In the city budget process that Tim was chatting about, we do not have really any dedicated funding coming in for our asset base. It's maybe around 12 million a year, and that's for like some roofs and HVAC systems. But our annual need is more around 25 to 50 million a year. We are right at this juncture of like really, really expensive and overhead, and nobody wants to spend money on this. And so we have a very precarious financial picture. Pretty much any project that we need has to have a very extensive and successful and difficult council vetting process. I spent 1.5 years trying to get our share of the legally mandated money for the electrical backbone at the Justice Center. So when you think about how hard it is just to get any money to do basic work, we are very excited about charter reform. We are hoping that in that financial process that we have a renewal rate that's higher than 0.012%. At some point, we are hoping that we can cut our asset expected life cycles down from 83 years to more, like 25 years, which is how long a building really lasts. So we're really excited to be here. We're really excited that this whole process is happening, and we are hoping for a budget process in which there's more money pulled out of discretionary funding and dedicated to a recurring capital fund, because that does not exist for us. For BTS, which is a technology services group, which does data security and fiber, and it does not exist for the brand new OMF security function. So there's a lot of need there, and right now it's just not politically attractive enough to really be addressed. So we're excited that you're here, and we appreciate your stewardship. So with that, let's go to the next piece. So charter reform. Our understanding of the full scope for this is council chambers, downtown workspaces, and there's a reason for that, and then district offices. We had to think, and you'll see a timeline in here about the critical path. Essentially, how much time did we have to do any of this work? And the answer was an insufficient period of time. And so we were like, well, we're going to have to put some stuff on the critical path. So we did. So what we saw as being the critical path goals include being ready for a new council by January 1st of 2025. Like that's our baseline expectation in terms of council chambers functionality. We want to be compliant at the very least with the ballot measure language. At the very least, the language, if not the intent, we're going to try and at least at the minimum. And then for us, it's really important that facilities are welcoming and safe. Facilities are and data security, physical security, those are often kind of the backbone things that are going on in the background that people just assume are there. But they're not just there, right? They're there because somebody chooses to invest in it, they choose to maintain it, and they choose to make it a priority. So from our perspective, especially with a new 12-person council coming on, we have no idea who these folks are. We have no idea how sophisticated they're going to be. And we have some pretty wild security stories that we are aware of, what council deals with when they're at home, what they deal with when they're in the office. We don't know who we're going to be getting. And so we want to make sure that if they show up on day one, they don't just feel welcome and safe in their spaces, but that they actually are. And so that's part of what our goal is. And then lastly, again, in part because we have no budget and in part because it's our duty, we want to make sure that facility decisions are cost effective. So that's what we see conceptually as our scope. Next slide, please. So I don't know how many people have done a big project before or like built a kitchen, anything, but this is the basic flow. Oh, go back. I have a big reveal here. Back further. Yeah. Okay. Process. I don't care who you are, like, unless you're just a totally Yahoo group, right? This is the process that you're most likely pursuing to do any kind of design and construction. So contracting, who am I working with? Programming, how big of a kitchen do I need? What do I cook, right? All of the real basics. Schematic design, that's where you're starting to think about different scenarios and approaches. You pick one, then you pull it into design development, and now you're starting to think about permitting, constructability, timing, et cetera. You go to construction documents, that's your bid set, and then you construct. So this is a process, unless you're just totally making it up, which I did on my first kitchen, but learning that, now running facilities, we don't do that anymore. This is the real legitimate process for running a project. Okay, now you can hit the button. So we want to be done with anything that we're doing by September 30th of 2024. And the reason for that is because, especially with council chambers, we've got a whole new group coming in and we have to figure out things like security operations. We have to commission the equipment. If there's any broken technology or AV stuff, we have to sort through all of that. We have to write standard operating procedures for an evacuation. All of these really pragmatic aspects of commissioning a site. So our deadline is actually the 30th of September, 2024. We started this project February 8th, 2023, because as you guys know, it takes a while to identify the project team, who are the right folks, who's really in charge. We don't actually typically work with BTS and security. We're separate groups. And even in the initial estimating, that was done separately and none of us spoke to each other because we're separate bureaus. In this instance, we pulled them together and we said, we're going to run this like a normal project. We're the prime. So it took a while for that to actually happen and play out. So if you do math here and you're really good at math, you can see a problem right off the bat. You can keep going, which is this is a 107-week process and we already only have 85 weeks to do this work. So there's already a hyper condensed timeline right off the bat. And so what we're executing is effectively a very compressed process that is identifying only the things that have to happen to get to that January 1st deadline. And there's frankly even fairly limited direct involvement with directly affected stakeholders. So like right now, our best friend is the council clerk, because that's the person who knows how everything happens.
Yeah.
We are doing even limited engagement with the commissioners. They're not very happy with us right now because of, we're moving their cheese, right? But we don't have the time to walk them through, like, do you like this tile or that tile, right? We're just not in that place. So it's very limited engagement even with council so that we can hit these deadlines. Just as a matter of perspective, our technology group had to order all of the equipment for the AV system and had a 1-year lead time. So they had to, pre-February 8th, they were having to say, like, do we have a project to build to? And do we have a directive to do this where we know we can get cost recovery of this very expensive equipment? So these are real deadlines for us and there's really no delay that can happen. Keep going. Some folks asked, oh, wait, go back. So folks asked us, I think I don't know if it was in the press or maybe it was in the notes to us of like, well, why didn't you have the right budget when it was up there for voters? This is the way, again, if you've done a project, I know my dishwasher project turned into a kitchen project. It was a horrible situation. It turned into a home loan, right? This is how it goes, right? You sort of know what you're doing and then you get more and more precise as you go through the process. So now you can hit the button. that's when we were asked to do in a budget, right? Which is, I think, a year before February 8th. So again, we actually don't have a planning department. So we start projects. The project team starts when we have a project to build to. So even finding planning dollars was very difficult to do this, from a feasibility studies assessment, doing a structural assessment of City Hall, knowing where we should be locating anything, a property search. There was just nothing there we could really build to. So we were doing kind of high level, back of the envelope estimates for the voters, because that's what we had to work off of. And so we pulled estimates from some other big projects that had been done, and did our very best to try to figure out cost per square foot. Even within that, we were like, well, how much is it per person? And we're like, that's not how you do a project, right? You do it based on square foot. So we were trying to wedge our apple into that orange salad and doing it way early. So again, the estimate was a little kind of speculative, because we didn't really know what the scope was. Okay. We hit this deadline very quickly. This team, as soon as we identified who the prime was, we ramped up, and within 3 weeks, we're presenting at council our estimate for 7.2 million, which is what we're still working off of. I'll be forthright that we put a lot of contingency into that budget because we did not know how things were going to shake out. And that 7.2 million is for the critical path work that we're doing, which is council chambers and downtown office spaces. We are working our way through this process at warp speed. I do want to credit these two for finding some innovative ways to do contracting at the city. City attorney's office actually moved work out of their queue to help shape up an entire specification for something called what is it called? CMGC?
Construction manager, general contractor.
Yeah, it's a very specific contracting type that they had in place for like bridges, but not for vertical construction. So all this technical stuff has been happening behind the scenes. They got that in place, which allowed us to lop off, I think, like 20 weeks from the construction schedule. It's how we got it into the 85 weeks. Everybody has been rallying. And with that, we ended up hitting a couple different points in the estimating process. Caitlin, do you want to just give a brief overview? I think you can keep hitting buttons.
Sure. So we will have essentially 3 different cost estimates. One initial done at the end of schematic design, and then one at the end of design development. As we get closer and closer to construction, and we have our CMGC on board, they will start reaching out to their community partners, their subs, and getting bids, so actual costs to do construction. And they'll prepare a guaranteed maximum price, which is the actual cost for the work. And so you can see as we go from low to high, we'll have more confidence in what we do and be prepared for construction, which is atypical of a design, bid, and build, where you don't know the cost until you're done cooking in your kitchen. So it allows us to get their integrated feedback, the contractor, throughout the design process.
So basically, yeah, instead of design and then construction, bid and construction, we went like that. And that means that we're looking at things like permitting, constructability, all of that while we're still completing design. So onto the scope, and then I'll pass it off to these two. So here's our phase 1 scope. It's basically these 2 elements, council chambers and it's downtown workspaces for both the council and the administrator. And there's very specific things we're trying to accomplish in this. And these are spaces that we work in all the time, so we're pretty well familiar with them. Randy's been the City Hall PM for years, so she knows City Hall extremely well. So the first is that the council chambers dais is just not big enough. So unless they want to like buddy up at a computer, they have to have bigger space. And so we need to find a place that fits 12 people. We had actually considered the Leah Hing room very briefly. We assumed that that was the only option because we could just build the dais. And because we assumed that council chambers could not be renovated. Like we were doing test fits and we couldn't get there. But we did onboard an architect and they have found a way, which is actually fantastic because there's a whole bunch of security reasons that we want offices and chambers in the same building, both from a just pure practicality standpoint, but also from a cost standpoint. And because if we moved them over here, we would end up with City Hall as a stranded asset, which is we have this big thing. What do we do with it? So first is just straight up size. Second, accessibility. Randy's done a ton of work with OEHR and other folks who have knowledge of the room's limitation. These are limitations we've long known. So, you know, if you're in a wheelchair, you're very limited in terms of where you can go in the site. From a wayfinding standpoint, it is suboptimal. It's very hard to know where you're at and to know what's going on. And just the audio visual itself was first off never designed for hybrid meetings, but certainly not designed for accessibility purposes. So from an access standpoint, renovating chambers is a great thing because it means we will enhance accessibility. Security, this is something that emerged for us as a finding, I would say really through the civil unrest. I think we've always known and suspected that City Hall, you know, maybe had different parts of it that we would want to think about. Nobody was down here for several years, except for police, fire, and my crews. So for, I don't know, 20 straight months, every day we went to that building and we not only cleaned the graffiti off, but in addition, we would find more broken glass. Commissioner Hardesty's office was shot into, I think, 9 times. We had people scaling the building. We had an improvised explosive device set off on the doors of City Hall. So we think about security a lot. It's part of actually why we are a little bit questioning district offices, and maybe that's a topic for discussion. But from our standpoint, we think a lot about security, and we think about the ability of the buildings to sort of silently protect the people working in them. We have unequal conditions within the building with regard to safe rooms. Before that, you know, becomes a laughing matter. Frequently, council has to evacuate chambers, I would say, too, because there's some sort of weird unrest. So when we paired downtown workspaces with council chambers, that was because they were going to need a place to go if they had to get out of council chambers. And even council chambers itself needs a safe room. So there's a lot of things that we think about there that aren't always evident to people, but they're evident to us, especially, you know, frankly, having gone through what some of we went through trying to handle you know, assaults on the building on a fairly regular basis. I think we had at one point 16 windows broken out, or, you know, it was just huge, and it took forever to get that dealt with. And then the last is technology improvements. So the City Hall AV broadcasting system is like installed before the dawn of time. So I think it's 15 years old, which in technology terms is before the dawn of time. We actually were going to replace the AV in 2019, 2020. We were already having discussions about it. And then when COVID hit, we realized, you know, this whole hybrid thing could be like a thing. And that's not the system that we were designing. Maybe we should wait to see what the actual world looks like. Oh, and by the way, technology systems, they only have a 5-year life cycle. So why would we spend all this money to put a system in when we don't know when people will actually be here to use it? And it's, you know, under warranty, right? We want people using it. So we paused on that intentionally so that we could really have more clarity on what the world post-COVID would look like and put in a system that's usable and it's, you know, the warranty is being taken advantage of from day one. So these 4 aspects of council chambers are, some of them are longstanding, some of them are emerging needs, and some of them have just to do with configuration changes resulting from the programmatic transitions. And then with regard to downtown workspaces, we really, the proposal on the table is to reuse the second floor broadly the way it's used now, but if you've been there, you know that the commissioners each have an office. And so we're trying to break that into district offices in the space, but then reconfigure the spaces so that they both have privacy from one another, but also have an ability to collaborate. So again, we're trying to engage, trying to create the opportunity for connection between the districts and then connection between the districts themselves. You know, that is part of politicking, right? Is that you know other people and you can craft a deal. Again, security, we want to have equitable security for these folks. We don't want to have some windows with ballistic film and others don't, some safe rooms, others don't. And then the technology there, they don't even have like Cat6 cabling in there. So as long as we're in, we want to take out the ancient cabling and put in more modern cabling to help support, you know, hybrid work and just modern work requirements. So that's the essence of the phase 1 scope. Cost estimate, this was the one that we did back like 3 weeks after February 8th. So I guess that would be like March 1st, if I got that right. This is the 7.2 million. These are here actuals to date as of when we did this PowerPoint. We are pausing on the mayor and
city administrator workspaces. We're going to wait to do those until after we finish council chambers and downtown workspaces. Some of that is just workload. But also we don't really have a lot of clarity yet from a programming standpoint on like, how many people are you going to have? And is the city budget office going to come into the city administrator's office? So there's some pieces there that aren't clear yet. The mayor's office is sort of unaffected, but we know we can lock off a part of it and probably make that into the city administrator's office, but that doesn't have to happen until 2025. So we're pushing that out a bit. Just as a note, there is probably a restack coming. That's for just the downtown core in general. So with charter reform, a lot of the bureaus, as they're looking to reorg, are starting to think about different space. Am I in the right location? Do I have the right work groups working together? What are the space implications? So we are trying to work in the blended rate, which is the downtown core, to figure that out. But a lot of bureaus don't know enough yet. So we are anticipating a restack starting in about 25, 26, which is where we go in and solve the puzzle. And we just move people to where they need to go. So some of the fourth floor activities like city attorney's office will be addressing that.
City Hall. Good to continue, Julia.
Can you hear us?
Okay.
Okay. I think we just, when we lost, yep, go ahead. Sorry, Randy.
Okay, so yeah, to back up, the photo on the left is the existing chambers now. Last time we had a remodel was in the 90s at City Hall. It currently fits 5, it seats 5. Obviously, we're increasing that to 12. So if you look at the floor plan on the right, you can see that the top of the page is where the existing dais is. So, next slide. Okay, so these are some of the initial studies we did, as Maddie was talking about. We looked at the Portland building, assuming that that was going to be the solution. How could we possibly get 12 into our existing chambers? Well, lo and behold, our design team is fantastic and really creative and came up with a solution. So you want to hit the next, you should get an X over there. There we go. So not only are they able to make chambers work, and again, looking at the previous slide of the space, how we're getting it to work is by pushing the back wall where the dais is out into kind of a central meeting area before you get to the elevator lobby. So that's how we're increasing space to get the dais. The rest of the space, the seating area stays the same. Also, the benefit was it was cheaper for us to remodel chambers than create a new chambers in Leahane, because Leahane is not set up for council chambers operations. So it was a win-win for us. Easy decision, path to move forward. Next. So here's where we're at today with some of our design team solutions. So just a rendering on the left of the increased dais size. We've also increased on the bottoms, kind of, a horseshoe line across the bottom. So that is an increased testimonial size too. Right now we can get, I think, 3 there. The design team came up with a larger solution. We have a very robust stakeholder committee, just for everyone's information on this project. And it involves our council clerk, our technology team, our HR team, our equity team, our SWAT team, Tate's on the committee, as well as part of the mayor's office. So we've had a lot of engagement. Everyone was really excited about the increased testimonial size. I think for myself, being at Council 3 is not always enough. A lot of times someone's still in the back who's part of the team who really should be at the table. So we like that increased size. We also have to the left, we've got our city attorney and our council clerk. Did I get that right, Caitlin? And then to our right is our city administrator, support staff, or mayor. And then obviously in the back is the 12 counselors. The next one is an overview from the balcony. So that space, not a lot of changes, but what we have done is push the ceiling back to allow a better viewpoint. And this is one of those studies that the design team did to say, here's what we're going to need to do to the space so the balcony can still see, can see the counselors.
Yeah, I guess I would just say in the programming, we worked quite a bit with council to identify what was essential. You know, this was a little bit of a snippet of their programming requirements. And so then we just did an options comparison of like, well, which of these available options match the programming requirements? So here's just a list, you'll have it, of some of the things that they cared about. Some people actually have asked us about why we didn't lease space. Just so you know, any lease space is like incremental to our existing cost structure. So it's just more money. They've got to run fiber. We have to reinstall the security program. We have to duplicate it in new spaces. In fact, a whole tenet of what we try to do is get out of lease spaces so that we're maximizing utilization of our own assets first. There's a resolution on the books, in fact, dictating that.
So yeah, so this moves on to the actual workspaces. And
yeah.
Yes.
Sorry.
So what our objectives were and what the current commissioners had wanted. So they had requested that they want to be in the same building that chambers are in. So fortunately, that also saves us costs. And let's see, you want to hit the next slide? See if we can move on to another. Yeah, here we go. So that also saves us costs in, well, coincidentally, that's where they're at. So we're going to take the existing space that they're in. We don't increase the footprint at all. We looked at several options with the design team, the designers being designers that they are, came up with some big ideas. And really, you know, and part of it was my request, what could you do if we wanted to look like modern office spaces today? The building is a bit archaic in its designs. We don't have offices on the perimeters anymore, private, you know, executive offices with the, you know, the little people working, you know, in cubicles in front. We don't do that anymore. Now we've got like the Portland building's a good example of how office spaces are today, where the outside is more an open space, brings daylighting in, and offices are more internal. So they really kind of push the boundaries to see what we could do. Said, okay, that's great. Let's put that on the back burner as an option. And let's look at a minimal impact, which is what our team originally proposed anyways. So, but you know, we explored everything. So the minimal impact was, we'll make some slight changes, we'll improve safe rooms, create an equitable space for each, try to also decrease some of the large current existing commissioners' offices to smaller offices, add some of the amenities that we have in the Portland building, like phone rooms, huddle rooms. What it prevented us from having was meeting spaces. So now they have no meeting spaces. Do we have one?
It's on
the
board over here.
So what we did is we jumped down to the first floor. We have an unused, underutilized space down there. Used to be a different bureau who moved out of the space. And we are going to make changes and have the meeting room be in that space. So it's all just meeting rooms in there. And we're also doing minimal changes. We're knocking down a couple of offices to kind of create a kind of bigger open area, which we're still under design, trying to determine, will that be a bigger, larger meeting room? Well, then you'd have to walk through it to get to the smaller meeting rooms, or will that be like more of a, you know, kind of an informal living space like we have in the Portland building? So all of their meeting rooms are now going to be reused as offices, and to accommodate the meeting rooms, we've pushed them down to this vacant spot on the first floor. So that leads us to temporary spaces. So this is kind of where we are at today. We're having a lot of discussions with our SPA team and the mayor's office. How do we make this work? We've got the ideas, we've got the plan, we're moving fast and furious to meet the deliverables and meet the timeline. Well, that, again, no longer are we looking at creating a new council chambers in Leahing. Now we're remodeling the existing one, but we still have council. So what do we do? Well, we explored a bunch of different regional chamber spaces and decided, well, it wasn't optimal. We'd have to commute to them. Our security team wasn't there. We'd still have to do upgrades for broadcasting. So we'd basically be making improvements for somebody else's facility that was not the city of Portland. So we took another look at our own buildings, and I was on this project at the 1900 building. So this is our Bureau of Development Services. So this is a lot of design reviews happen in this space. We remodeled this, and I think about 2019, I completed this project, brought the teams over. Our council clerk has already picked out her seat. She was so excited about this space. It's modernized. It's a big difference in what they have now. The AV is, relatively upgraded, although we will need to make some changes to make it work for broadcasting still. But again, we're investing in our own facility. And so our security team was excited about it. We already have security here. He's already got a plan on how we're going to bring the commissioners in. We've got a parking garage. Here's the, the entrances and the exits and the changes that we can make. So this is what we have proposed to the mayor's team. And we're currently kind of looking at costs right now as far as, mostly we're looking at AV costs. Obviously, we don't need to do any furniture changes. There's no tenant improvements. Security upgrades are minimal. It meets all the needs. So this is what we have proposed for us to be able to move them out of council chambers, remodel council chambers, and meet the timeline and the deliverable. Next slide. So let's see.
Yeah, so the question now on the table with council is workspaces. They feel pretty attached to the workspaces that they're in. They feel very busy. We totally acknowledge that. So we're working through the math with them right now of, hey man, think about how inconvenient it's going to be to have council chambers up at 1900 and you're down here at City Hall. We have found workspaces for them at 1900. We feel like it's the most advisable option is to do it all as one package, which is everything happens in City Hall at once, because mobilization is its own cost and construction. But there's also just security reasons. There's a lot of factors there that we are encouraging that. As noted, we would like to get started on a restack of the blended rate space. It's kind of hard to do that when we have spaces we're holding for other folks. And frankly, we want to be ready by January 1st, 2025. We feel like this is a red carpet situation. It might be a really cost-effective red carpet that we got, from TJ Maxx. It's not like super fancy, right? But it's what we've got in the budget. $7.2 million is not a lot for facilities, but it's a lot for the city. And so we want to make sure that we have that and it's there for them and they feel like we're ready. So this is a whole point of discussion right now with council. And I think the mayor's office has been extremely helpful in helping us navigate that conversation. But we think that there are options available for them in either scenario, whether they delay that part of it a year or whether they decide to proceed in 2024. In either way, they have something viable and workable. And I think that's it. So I don't know where we're at for timing, but we're just so excited somebody asked questions. We're pretty open book. So anything you want to know, we're happy to try to field.
That was wonderful. Thank you so much. I think we've had a lot of great presentations tonight, so we've gone a little bit over. So the way that we're going to do this is anyone that has questions, raise your hand. I'll call on you and you can ask them. We're not going to have time in the meeting for you all to provide answers right here. So hopefully this will be an idea of what's to come to you, and we'll make sure that everyone gets answers out to them. But I do want to make sure that everyone that has a question gets a chance to. So please raise your hands up if you haven't already. And again, Be cognizant of time. We do just have 5 minutes for people to just ask questions, so be concise, please. Thank you. Okay, Amy.
Thank you. This was shocking in the best way and just really. I'm quite curious, like, given the immensity of this juncture, is there opportunity for philanthropic funds or any like outside public-private partnerships or like specific one-time outside gifts that could augment this or make it a like a separate process? And is there any reason that we couldn't do that or couldn't be pursued by the council except that they are constructionists for the project?
Thank you, Amy. Zach.
Oh, sorry, I thought there might be a response. The question I had was if we were to advise city council to put on the budget some dollars for planning of district offices within the, let's see, that would be 24-25 year, would you have capacity to be able to actually do the real estate and planning to scope out at least a dollar amount that the new council could then deliberate?
And can I just briefly suggest that we come back to this forum to have a whole discussion that's just about district offices, because we have a lot of thoughts about this. And we have a lot of thoughts that are worth a discussion, I would say.
Love that. Thank you. Thank you, Zach. Joe?
Yeah, I want to say, oops. There. Oh, there you go. Am I doing just, this was really nice, really informative, and it's now sort of part of public record. You've got something that you can direct people to. You can just take this part of the meeting and create a link that you can give to anybody. I'd recommend either that you come to us regularly if you're not already going to some other public forum, or that we set up a subcommittee specifically for the purpose of you coming, reporting, answering questions, and having something you can put on the public record. Lots of interest in this, of course, and not very many answers to date. So this is just great. The second is, I think Zach's question is critical. Do you have the capacity to also do district offices? Even if you don't, there needs to be some preparation, because this is going to be item number one for the new council. Where's my district office? And it's going to end up being a coffee shop if there's not a good answer. So I guess all that adds up to, I think we ought to be involved in this process, either as a whole committee or as a subcommittee.
Thank you, Joe. Destiny?
Great, thank you for the presentation, and I hope council takes your recommendation highly, because you're obviously expertise on security and things like that, and their safety and well-being and their job responsibility. So I hope they take this temporary space, small time uncomfortability for long-term gains. And I like the explanation of this is a conversation, sorry. One of the things which was district offices, was the cost, whether or not there's a city-owned asset. I'm wondering, when you're thinking of restacking these conversations of district spaces where they can reach community, would be great. And if those conversations are happening in other phases of work, actually having hard to reach constituent voters be there, because hard to reach voters and constituents, because City Hall is not really accessible to many people, know that. And we want a space that's friendly for people to show up and feel comfortable, especially if we're going to have, in my hopes, a really diverse council supporting the city.
Thank you, Destiny. And we've got one more question, I think, from Bill.
Thank you. I heard at the beginning of your presentation that the Office of Management and Finance has a limited, reliable income or revenue stream, but it has a lot of projects it has to plan. At a later time, can you elaborate or clarify those difficulties and how one could improve them? Or if there's an existing document report, could you please share that? Thank you.
And I might recommend that topic go with the district office topic, because that is actually a huge issue for us. We have very risky facilities that need investment. A lot of investment. And so those two things dovetail directly.
Yeah, looking out for the city. Yeah, that would be real important.
Thank you so much for all of this information.
Was out of the room or?
Oh, he doesn't have his computer.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Yeah, just, if you could just ask your question, keep it real quick.
Sure. I just like the concept of when you've got the cross-bureau, multi-bureau collaboration to undertake a project. And I would like to see more of that happen. Thank you so much. It was an excellent presentation. Just appreciate your being here and having thought through this so well and expressing it so well. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I can express gratitude from all of us here and also say that we do hope to hear from you again. And like, we'll be in touch about some of these other things that are brought up, especially district offices.
Thank you so much for the opportunity for us to be here, present. This team has been working very hard to meet the timelines and, you know, constant changes that come at us. And we're just constantly batting things away and just trying to stay focused. And it's our pleasure to be able to share, you know, where we're at in the process and all the work we've been doing. So thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. I think this is our first. Don't take that lightly, please. And with that, I'm going to move on to next steps for us. The recording of this meeting will be posted on the committee's website. Please send any clarification or modification requests on the subcommittee proposals to the co-chairs and June by next Tuesday, September 12th. Also, on Tuesday, September 12th, that evening, there is a workshop created by the Office of Equity and Human Rights to support our community engagement work. This is a mandatory workshop as decided by us. If you cannot attend next week, please make sure to watch the recording. City Council will have its first reading of Code 3.02 on council organization and procedures on Wednesday, September 20th at 2 p.m. That same evening is our next committee meeting. Next slide. Okay. Here's a breakdown of our proposed upcoming schedule. Again, this is just a proposal. This may shift around. As people have suggestions or ideas for what we could use our meeting time for, always feel free to reach out to the co-chairs and Julia. We love hearing from you. And with that, we are adjourned.
Well,
Thank you so
just a
much.
second applause. Yeah, this was a great job.
No, thank you.
Well, and with that, we're adjourned. Thank you.